Hi, this is Rubaat Khan, and today we are going to start lecture 7 of Object-Oriented Programming series. And today's lecture is about changing reference pointer. So let's get started. So we are given a code here. So over here we have a test class. We have a method named met that takes x and y and self, of course. And then in this method we create two instance variables x and y using the information of the local variables. So over here the first object is created. So let's say the object is created in Dhaka, and this contains a method named met, and it contains self, x and y. So we have x, y, and self inside met, and these all belong to Dhaka, and t1 is a variable that points to Dhaka. Then we have a second object, and the second object is created in CTG. So we have CTG here, and inside CTG we have the exact same thing. We have a method called met, and it has three local variables: self, x, and y. And this CTG is pointed by the variable t2. Now over here, I call met method of t1, and inside the arguments, I send 10 and 20. So over here, inside Dhaka, this met is called, and x will contain 10. So let me use a different color. So x will contain 10 and y will contain 20. And over here, two more variables are created. These are instance variables. So over here, let's say x and y. X will have 10 and y will have 20. So I'm saving whatever I have in the local variable x to the global variable x. Whatever I have in the local variable y is being stored in the global variable y. So again, I call met of t2. So over here, this met is being called, and in the arguments, we send 50 and 60. So x has 50 over here, and y has 60 over here. Again, we create two instance variables, x and y, and we store the information 50 and 60 over here. Then I print, okay, let me use a different color. Let me use green. So then I print t1.x. So I go to t1, I find Dhaka, I find x, which is 10. So if I write the output, t1.x gives me 10 and t1.y gives me 20. Again, if I print t2.x and t2.y, we get 50 and 60. So my second pair of output is 50 and 60. Now I'll write this line over here. And this line is the purpose of this video. So I write t1 equals t2. So what happens over here? T1 now points at T2. So T1 was pointing at Dhaka over here. After this line, T1 now points at T2. This means, and we know that T2 is pointing at CTG. So this line means T1 is pointing to T2 and T2 is pointing to CTG, and this is indirectly T1 is also pointing at CTG. Okay, so a lot of people make this mistake that we store the information or the data of T2 inside T1. Okay, but that's not what happens. What we think is, so what most of the people think, or what it looks like, is the data of T2 is being stored inside T1, or in other words, the data of T1 are being replaced by data of T2. But this is something wrong. Okay, this is not what happens, although this looks like. But what actually happens is, over here, T1 now points at T2. Okay, so what really happens, T2 points, I'm sorry, what? T1. So T1 points at T2, or indirectly, T1 points at the address or at the location of T2. So if I write something like this, and if A and B are memory locations, okay, by the way, this is true for memory locations only, not if they contain integers or floating point numbers. If these variables contain memory locations, then the left hand side will point to the right hand side. Okay, so over here, T1 now points at T2 means T1 is also pointing at CTG. Now T1 is no longer pointing at Dhaka. Now when I call, after this line, when I call T1.met, this met will be called, because inside T1 now we have CTG. Now when I call T1.met, this 100 and 200 will be sent over here. So this will be 100, this will be 200, and according to the method, the global variables will have these values, so these values will be replaced by 100 and 200. And when I call t2.x and when I print t2.x and t2.y, t2 is also pointing at CTG, so these values will be printed. So we'll get 100 and 200 as the output. Now T1 no longer points at Dhaka. Therefore, whenever we call T1 or whenever we call T2, these two variables are pointing at the same address or same location. So this method and this variable will be accessed. So this is a very important uh, concept of object-oriented programming. I hope we've understood. Thank you very much.